In this podcast episode, Niall Ferguson discusses various aspects of history and the lessons that can be learned from it. He begins by addressing the accuracy of the quote, "History doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes." Ferguson points out that the quote is often misattributed to Mark Twain, who actually made a more complex statement about history being like a kaleidoscope. He explains that history does not repeat itself in a predictable pattern, but rather has a certain regularity to it, similar to the shifting patterns in a kaleidoscope. Ferguson emphasizes the unpredictability and non-linearity of history, stating that it is noisy, volatile, and often unpredictable. He argues that history is not cyclical and does not follow a predetermined pattern. While people may try to find patterns and draw simple lessons from history, they are often disappointed. He believes that one of the most important lessons to be learned from history is that it is contingent and chaotic, with small decisions having massive consequences and big decisions sometimes having no consequences at all. Ferguson acknowledges the human desire for simple lessons and predictable patterns in history, but cautions against this approach. He argues that history is not a story with a beginning, middle, and happy ending, but rather an open-ended game with constant turning points and alternative futures. He believes that recognizing the contingency and chaos of historical events can lead to better decision-making in the present. The guest discusses the limitations of drawing simple lessons from history, using the example of the invasion of Iraq by the United States. He argues that the belief that it would be easy to establish democracy in Iraq was a bad lesson learned from history. The right lesson, according to Ferguson, is that it is extremely difficult to establish a stable government in the aftermath of toppling a dictator, and it takes time and resources. Ferguson also addresses the role of historians in shaping narratives and the dangers of oversimplification and confirmation bias. He argues that historians have a responsibility to present a comprehensive and nuanced understanding of history, rather than reinforcing preconceived notions or seeking confirmation of their own biases. He believes that history should be approached with an open mind and a willingness to challenge one's own assumptions. The guest emphasizes the importance of understanding the contingency and chaos of historical events. He argues that history is not predetermined and that small factors can have significant impacts. He uses the example of Stalin's failure to anticipate the German invasion of the Soviet Union, which had a profound impact on the course of World War II. He suggests that recognizing the potential for alternative outcomes can lead to a better understanding of historical processes. Ferguson discusses the challenges of predicting the future based on historical models. He points out that even the best economists and experts often get it wrong when trying to project economic growth and inflation rates. He argues that history is not a reliable prediction engine and that attempts to model the historical process often lead to disappointment. Ferguson also highlights the pitfalls of historical analogies, particularly the tendency to draw comparisons with Nazi Germany. He argues that history is much more diverse and complex than the narrow focus on a few specific events or periods. He suggests that a broader understanding of history, including the study of empires throughout time, can provide a more comprehensive perspective. Ferguson discusses the value of broadening historical education and the limitations of focusing on a narrow range of historical events. He suggests that a curriculum that includes a broader chronological and geographical scope would provide a more comprehensive understanding of history. He emphasizes the need to move beyond a limited focus on Nazi Germany and the mid-20th century and explore the rich diversity of human history. Ferguson also reflects on the significance of the Library of Alexandria and the potential impact of losing ancient knowledge. He suggests that the Renaissance and the development of Western civilization would not have been possible without the preservation and rediscovery of ancient texts. He emphasizes the importance of preserving and learning from historical knowledge to inform our understanding of the present and shape the future. Ferguson goes on to discuss the state of Scotland in the 17th century. He describes it as a place with warring mountain tribes, religious fanatics, and extreme Calvinists. The capital city, Edinburgh, was controlled by these groups, leading to a high level of violence. Ferguson notes that Scotland had one of the highest homicide rates in the world during this time, surpassing even the rates seen in American cities today. Ferguson draws a comparison between Scotland in the 17th century and Afghanistan today. He suggests that the two regions share similarities in terms of tribal conflicts, religious extremism, and violence. By highlighting these similarities, Ferguson raises the question of how Scotland was able to transition from a state of chaos and violence to becoming a centre of intellectual innovation and economic dynamism in just a few decades. Ferguson explores the transformation of Scotland from a state of chaos and violence to becoming a centre of intellectual innovation and economic dynamism in the late 18th century. He mentions the Jacobite Rising and the Civil War carnage that occurred in the mid-18th century. Despite this, Scotland experienced an Enlightenment period and became known for its intellectual contributions, such as the works of Adam Smith and Walter Scott. Based on the example of Scotland's transformation, Ferguson suggests that it may be possible for Afghanistan to undergo a similar transition from chaos to progress. He argues that if Scotland could evolve from a state resembling Afghanistan to becoming a centre of intellectual and economic advancement, then there is hope for Afghanistan in the 21st century. Ferguson shares his predictions for popular politics in America in the next 5 to 10 years. He suggests that Joe Biden's presidency is unlikely to be a two-term presidency, similar to previous presidents like Gerald Ford, Jimmy Carter, and George Bush Sr. Ferguson believes that the Republican nominee is likely to win the next election, and he notes that Donald Trump is currently ahead of the competition. Ferguson discusses the possibility of Donald Trump being re-elected as president. He acknowledges that many people struggle to imagine Trump being re-elected, just as they did in 2015 when he first ran for office. However, Ferguson argues that the probability of Trump coming back is higher than most people realize. He suggests that if Biden remains the Democratic nominee and Trump runs again, there is a significant chance of Trump winning the election. He speculates on the potential consequences of Trump's re-election. He suggests that if Trump wins, the left will refuse to acknowledge the result, similar to how Trump refused to accept his defeat in the previous election. This could lead to political instability and unrest in the country. Ferguson also mentions that the second Trump administration would likely be more prepared for power than the first, which could further exacerbate tensions. Ferguson expresses concerns for the American Republic, highlighting the historical challenges faced by republics throughout history. He notes that republics tend to be less stable than monarchies, as they are prone to partisan conflicts, corruption, and the rise of demagogues. Ferguson suggests that the current political climate in the United States aligns more with the Roman Republic than the Roman Empire, and he warns of potential instability if the country continues down this path. He discusses the perception of double standards in American politics, particularly regarding the treatment of Trump and the Bidens. He suggests that many Americans believe a double standard has been applied, with Trump being targeted by the justice system while the Bidens receive different treatment. Ferguson argues that this perception could play a significant role in the next election, as it erodes trust in the political system and reinforces the idea that all politicians are corrupt. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe.